Okay, now we're recording. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this interchapter event. We're just CFI. We have CFI founder here, Brittany Villegas, and I'm just here, Enrique, the co-leader of Phoenix Crypto. So, yeah, let me introduce Brittany. Brittany, a Texas girl, which is now she's also a journalist for a profession, and she's now into coding and working in Sweden. And she will be our host tonight. Like, we're gonna make some questions to her, and I hope you had a great time.
Yes.
So yeah, I want to start with I want to start with your journalism past. Like, you have a minor in French and in journalism. How did you come up with the idea at that time?
To study journalism in French or
Yes, ma'am.
okay, so I've always been pretty good at writing. Um, or that's like the only thing that people ever told me I was good at. It's interesting because like something I'm really bitter about nowadays, but I'm trying to not be because everything happens for a reason, and I can't complain about where I am now because I really like where my life, what everything I've done has led up to this point, and I can't complain about my life right now.
Mhm.
But I was really good at math in high school too, was the thing, and I loved math. But no one ever said, "Oh, you're good at math. You should like study math, or you could do computer science." But I digress. But I was also good at writing, and that was the one thing that people would always tell me I'm good at. And I really fantasized this idea because I rarely left Texas when I was younger. But my favorite books growing up were Harry Potter, so I had this like fantasy of going to Oxford University and studying literature and being a writer and writing books. And um, yeah, I mean, obviously that didn't happen, but I really played that fantasy in my mind. But it actually took me 8 years to finally get my bachelor's degree because I was fucked up. Sorry if I'm not sure if you can say that.
You
Sorry,
can.
Codecademy.
All good.
Thank you, Nelson. I had a very troubled young adulthood. I drank a lot, I partied a lot, I did a lot of drugs, I had multiple boyfriends at the same time, but that's not bad. I mean, that's kind of fun, right? That part is, but I was just I was a troubled youth, after I graduated high school because I did really well in high school. But then it's like that ends and that kind of structure ends. And I tried to go to college and I hated it. And then I ended up in community college. And I mean, that's fine, but no one was ever like, oh, that's fine. I felt like a failure. And then I just like really fell. I kept going down, digging myself deeper and deeper and deeper, if that makes sense. So it took me 8 years to get my degree. I kept changing my major. I would go to class and then I would just stop going mid semester. But finally, I kind of like reached this breaking point. I won't go into too much detail of that, but it was kind of either I am crazy and this is going to be me for the rest of my life, or I am smart and I am capable and I just need to get my shit together. And then my two friends, who funny enough are going to be here next week for Midsummer in Sweden. My two friends, Rainy and Francine, they're a couple, and Rainy's going to propose to Francine at Rosendal's, actually. Yeah, on Thursday as a surprise.
At
She has no
midsummer?
idea.
Wow.
Yeah, they're two of my best friends. I've known them since we were like in high school, 15, 16. They at that time, this was 10 years ago, so 2012, August, or it was June, July 2012. They were going to the University of North Texas in Denton. They have a really good journalism school. They were majoring in journalism with a concentration in advertising. And they really helped me. They were like, look, you are really good at this. You are capable. Just come to school with us. And like, we can all do this together. And
Mhm.
that's how I decided to major in journalism. And once I started doing it, like, I loved it. I loved my teachers. I loved my classes. It was very, what's the word? Like, it involves so many things, not just writing. Like, we did like videography, and then we did a lot of like interviewing techniques and graphic design, and learning the more technical parts, photography as well, videography and photography, and working with cameras and doing editing and stuff like that. So it was very, what's the word? It encompassed so many different disciplines within journalism. So I did that. And this is a very long answer to your question, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm not sorry. Women apologize too much. But then, like I completed my first semester. I did really well. I was finally in a good place after not being in a good place for so long. And then I got this email randomly, and it was like study French in France. And because I had signed up for French the semester after, because I always listened to this sort of music called Yee Yee. I don't know. And it's like François Hardy and Serge Danzer and
Okay.
Jacques Dutronc. It's like 60s French, like funk music, kind of funk, rock, folk. I don't know. So I really wanted to know what they were saying and sing along to their songs. But then I got this email, study French in France, and I told I remember telling my grandmother about it, my granny, and she was like, "Oh, that would be a nice dream." Kind of like, "Oh, mm, you can't do it." Because like we were poor and I lived on her couch, and I was working two jobs at that time, and I had to walk a mile to take the bus, to take the train, to get to school. I was commuting 4 hours every day, or it took me 4 hours to get to the school and back. So
Wow.
I'd like study on the train. Yeah, um, it was a really tough time. But she was like, "Oh yeah, that'll be a nice dream." And I was like, "She doesn't think I can do it, so I'm gonna fucking do it." And so I basically ate corn out of a can, or like vegetables out of a can. I walked everywhere. I'd only take the bus. I worked so many jobs, and I was saving like $200 a week for over a year. So I saved up all this money just so I could go study abroad in France. And yeah, that's why I minored in French, because I love French music and I always wanted to come to Europe. I had never really left Texas, but I always never felt like I belonged. Um, and yeah, that really set off to where I am now, which is I live in Europe now, and I'm married to a Swedish man. So
Wow, that's
that was a very
great.
long answer.
No, that's a great answer. So, so now that we're here in Code Academy, how did you like get into coding? Was it like when you were already here in Sweden, or already in America? You were thinking about going coding, IT, and stuff like that.
Prepare yourselves, gentlemen, for another long answer. So I'm glad that you asked that, because no, I never really thought about coding until I moved here. Because in Sweden, there's so many opportunities to go to like these boot camps to where you don't have to pay, like they'll pay you to learn how to code because there's such a shortage of developers here. So this was back in 2018. I would see like advertisements for this program called SALT and like academic work and stuff like that, because I couldn't get jobs in marketing and journalism and writing because I don't know Swedish, or I didn't know Swedish at that time. I still can't write in Swedish. Writing in Swedish is a whole other thing that I don't think I will ever master. Um, so it kind of like crossed my mind then, but then I was pregnant and I had my daughter in 2018. I was on maternity leave for a year. I was working at this restaurant too that I really loved working at. Um, and so I was pretty much fine. And I was still trying to get jobs in like copywriting and in marketing at that point, but I couldn't. But then my friends had a startup. So this is also a really long story, but I'm going to try and keep it short. So my friends had a tech startup that I would do marketing for, and I was the chief marketing officer for. Um, uh, Long story short, it failed, and I got really burnt out doing it, and I was very upset about how that ended. So I'm not going to talk too much about it because I'm still upset. I was telling my boss today because I'm upset about something at work. She's like, "It's fine. Like, we'll get past this." And I'm like, "You're right. It's just going to take me maybe 5 years, and then I'll get over it. So just give me 5 years, maybe 10 years. I hold grudges, if you can't tell. I just can't get over shit for the life of me. It's a weakness. I recognize it. But anyways, so the startup, it was a femtech health startup. So basically what we did is we developed an app to help predominantly women, but basically anyone with a uterus, manage their pain and their uterus from this disease called endometriosis. It's a very common disease, but there's not the best ways to manage the pain out there. So what we try to do is develop an app, gather data, and be able to translate that data into helping people manage their pain better, because it was a very individual experience. But basically, the treatment for it is, oh, just take birth control and you'll be fine. But no, that's not true. And so that was kind of my taste with tech, and I really had to understand like the underlying tech that was driving the app in order to market it better. And that's when I really was like, oh, this is actually really interesting. Like tech can be used in so many different ways, not just like a standard, oh, I'm going to sit behind a computer screen in a basement and, you know, code myself to death and like eat Doritos and drink, you know, like that trope, that coding trope of the guy in the basement or like the girl with the dragon tattoo. Um,
Yeah, I love
like
Doritos one.
yeah, like the episode of South Park where like Cartman's playing World of
Yeah,
Warcraft
yeah,
or
yeah. I
something.
remember that that
Yeah,
that
that's
that episode.
yeah. Like tech can go beyond that. Although the guy that was in charge of tech at the startup was a fucking idiot. Sorry. He was very arrogant and he did not really know what he was doing. And I really want to introduce him to Matt because Matt would rip him a new one because Matt is like the smartest person I know. Matt, who's the co-leader for CFE.
Yeah.
And he's very humble about it too. You know, this guy, he was not the smartest person you knew, but he was also not very humble. He thought he knew everything. Um, but I digress. So that failed. And then I got very burnt out, and I was actually diagnosed with a stress disorder at that time. So basically, my priority was to just take it easy, learn Swedish, and kind of put the pieces back together and try and find something that I can create stability with here. And at that time, I was just studying Swedish, like I said, but I felt very understimulated still. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try coding because I believe in myself and I think it would be fun. And I loved math growing up. So maybe I'll like this. But also,
Mhm.
I just really want a stable job. I want to future proof my job. Um, but then I started doing it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I love this. And I started on Codecademy. And I still use Codecademy to this day, even though like I've been employed for almost a year now as a junior developer, because there's just always something to learn on it. And that's my favorite thing about coding. There's always something new to learn. So yeah, that's how I got into it. Burnout and then Codecademy.
That's a great start, Codecademy. Okay, so
Yes.
Sweden is quite tech friendly, and Stockholm is like for innovation hub like Spotify and all the
Hmm.
startups that are in Stockholm. Do you think being surrounded by this culture or this environment like has affected you in any way?
I think it's made me more conscious. I think before, like, I never really valued those sort of things or cared about those sort of things. I was just like, oh, it's just a new shiny thing. But no, I mean, tech enables our lives in a lot of way, and it's really interesting how ingrained it is in Swedish cultures. So, like, when you say, oh, you're like, yes, there is Spotify here, and there's Klarna here, and there's all these like major tech companies. But then, you know, we have this thing here called Bank ID. Nelson, I'm sure you know what you obviously know what Bank ID is, and I think like that alone just trigger like what word am I thinking of? Just intertwines every aspect of our life into the digital world because with Bank, it's like this verification app and like you can verify who you are through this app, and you do it to get a prescription, you do it to apply to school, you do it to pay for things, you do it to access your bank account, you do it to access Skatteverket, which is like the tax agency, or uh, yes, or you can ask a question out loud if you want. Yeah, you can interrupt me. I don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
No,
You have
continue. I
microphone.
will ask later. I mean, for later.
It's thank you. And so like for instance, today I had to order a transcript from my university back in the US, and it's just so the process is so tedious.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's really not that tedious. I just have to press about a bunch of buttons. But then it really makes you think in Sweden, it's just so easy to do things, to buy things, to apply for things, to verify your identity in order to just get access to things. And in the US, it's still so antiquated and so discombobulated. And so I think because we kind of have like this socialist structure in place here, it's easier to intertwine everything business and more of this bureaucratic processes. So yes, I very much value tech so much here, but I think because it's so ingrained in Swedish society. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I mean it's also like quite interesting. I mean, also like maybe worldwide, like America is pretty, like high tech, like NASA and whatever they are doing there, and also Code Academies from the United States. So it's
Yeah.
like quite quite great to hear this comparison between Sweden and America. So you also like maybe you have been in both countries. Do you think like there is also like a different maybe innovation culture or different mindset from people? I mean, in any subject, like may also like more related to tech. But do you think they differ the mindset in the both countries?
Absolutely. So what I will say about the US is I think the competitiveness of living and working in the US and striving to be the best
Mhm.
does absolutely have its advantages, and it does kind of create this culture for innovation. But then I think it also stymies like your ability to not only think bigger, but to think more communal, and like to think about, okay, how can we make all of us better, not just me, or how can I make myself look better. I think in Sweden it can be very communal, so it's not only about improving your life or maybe even your individual company's life, like your life, your team's life, or your individual company. It's more so thinking about how can we make society better, how can we move society forward. It's very, it thinks of everyone, and it kind of shows. I think that there's more of a thoughtfulness behind everything that we're creating here, especially with tech, but then also the the crossing of tech with other aspects like fighting the climate crisis or creating more what word am I thinking of? More equitable societal structures, or just creating a more innovative way of moving about the country, or even just when I say fighting the climate crisis, like better farming techniques and better, I don't know, air purification techniques and better energy sources and stuff like that. So it's very thoughtful, I would say. But then also Swedes can be very
Sweets.
they're just like, yeah, just kind of like, we'll get it done. Well, it'll happen. And then it's like a year goes by, and it's like, why didn't you reply to my email? It's been a year, you know. How are we supposed to build something so complex if you can't even reply to my goddamn email? So I think Swedes can be very blasé. So that is one aspect I think I miss the most about America. Working in America is everyone's on top of everything, but then
Okay.
also it's not as it's not always as thoughtful there and as communal there. So, but I do miss Americans. I shit on America a lot, but I have to say I do miss Americans. So I'm really excited for my friends to come here next week. So
Wow. Yeah.
yes.
Now that we're going to talk about like America and Sweden and coding, and that you went to college in America, do you think, would you say like universities worldwide or maybe just in America and Sweden are overrated now that like we actually learn to code not in a university but in a website? So do you think like university does not like playing their function in really educating people for a like, job?
Yes and no. I think I think this idea that universities provide no value for working isn't completely true. I mean, I do think that there are, when it comes to classes, taking actual classes and getting knowledge on certain things to be prepared for the workplace. Like, I think that those classes and like what they're teaching you can be very antiquated or very behind. So for
Mhm.
instance, when I was studying in journalism, I mean, I learned all the news writing techniques and stuff. I was predominantly working in PR, but I also took some ad classes too. But the way that they were teaching us how to do things is there was like no digitalization of anything whatsoever. I mean, granted, this was in 2012. It was before like everything, like compared to 2012, we're like in peak digitalization now. Like everything is digital. The tools we use are digital. The way we store data is digital. The way we communicate with each other is digital. And there it was like we're gonna create like actual like boards of like I don't know concept art or illustrations or something like that. And it was just kind of like the mock working structure that they created was very antiquated. And I think that the same can go for studying computer science here. But at the same time, I think university does teach you very critical skills of researching. I think researching is the biggest thing that everyone should learn how to do. And
Sure.
just meeting deadlines and reading, like thoroughly reading things through, like university at least taught me that. It could just be what I majored in. Um,
Mhm.
but I do think it does teach you critical skills and collaboration too, because of group projects. If you're lucky enough to get stuck with good people,
Yeah,
not always.
college. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm actually considering going back to university. I really am. Like I'm on the fence, but I'm thinking of going to KTH to study information technology there because it matters. It really does matter to have that on your resume. Unfortunately, yeah. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Okay. There is a question from Nelson. Do you want to read yourself, or do you want me to read that, Nelson?
Oh, I can read it. Do you have or have you? Yes, yes. I want to blog so bad. I just don't have the time or energy to do it. I do have the energy to do it. I just prioritize my energy towards maybe things that aren't always well suited for me or the community, which is watching Drag Race over and over again. Um, I would love to start blogging. I think it's something that could be very much needed. So my idea is with our website that we're creating, we will have some sort of section for content there and a blog there. It's sometimes I second guess the idea just because Free Code Camp, they have such a good blog. I don't know if you follow their newsletter.
Yeah, they
Um,
have a great one.
their blog is so good, and I'm just like, what am I going to write about? But I think that our group is just provides so many different perspectives of what it is to be involved in tech that I think it would just be nice to share our stories and our perspectives on what tech is. So, yeah.
There's
We
another
stay
one from
tuned.
Juan. There is another question from Juan. Uh,
Yes. Where are you thinking of doing your internship at? And how much are you going to have to pay to do that internship? But I do agree. I love Free Code Camp and Codecademy and Scrimba. Oh my God. I would recommend Scrimba 10 out of 10. I've been doing it. It is so good. I'm so glad I paid for it. For 6 months, it's 900 kroner or like 100 US dollars to do their front end path. So if you're ever interested in doing front end, Scrimba, it's so good. Like I finally understand divs and also Flexbox. And
Oh my god, I still not over Flexbox. So complicated.
in centering in CSS, Scrimba teaches you how to center in CSS. And I finally get it. I finally get it. Yeah.
I
So.
don't know. Maybe Codecademy sounds like a great company.
I mean, if you can afford to do it and to work for a well-known, because I know who Codecademy is, and actually I have their app on my phone. I love their like mathematics tutorials because they go into the history of math on them, which is really nerdy, but it's so interesting. If you have the opportunity and if you can afford it, and if it's not going to cost too much of your energy or your finances to do that, then I would 100% say do it, just so you get that sort of recognition on your resume, but also I think for the experience too, because I think what they're doing is such a good cause, and you're probably going to be surrounded by very smart people. So
That's
I would
true.
say do it. Yeah. The Codecademy, I love their concept, and I like their tutorials. So
Yeah, it's weird that we mentioned free code camp. That my next question was about that. Like, now that you've worked like in a company in H&M, and how would you rate the current curricula of like Codecademy, free code camp, like in relation to what you see that the industry is asking for, or like actually working in a company in tech?
So I think it's good at priming your mind for, coding. Essentially, that's why those things exist. So you learn how to code. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that those systems teach you how to work in a tech environment. They don't teach you about the software development lifecycle. You can't really learn that though, is the thing. Like you just have to sit through it in order to learn how to do it. And I think Free Code Camp and Codecademy could get a little bit better at talking about understanding the business, kind of the business side of what you're working with in a tech environment, because understanding your business and understanding your users, even if say you're not in UX or you're not that sort of like designer, it's still really just, and this is me, I don't think every developer has to understand the business aspect of what they're coding. I know for a fact not every developer does, but for me personally, it makes what I'm developing more meaningful and it makes it less abstract. Like always keeping the user in the back of my mind helps me be a better coder, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I don't think that Free Code Camp and Codecademy talk about that. At least I haven't encountered it. I guess they talk about UX a little bit, but I think keeping the business side of what you're developing in your mind goes beyond just UX. Like it's in everything you do. So I don't know.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Um, okay, this is more a personal ones. Like, for example, how has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success? Or do you have like a favorite failure you have had in the past?
So like I said, I'm still very angry about how the startup played out. But had that not happened, had we not, and when I say it, we failed miserably, like we failed miserably, like because we got this like campaign with, it's called Libras here. Maybe it's called Bodyform or something in Colombia, but they're like a global company, Essity, and they create personal hygiene products. So like they create like band-aids and they created face masks, especially at the height of Corona, but they also create tampons and pads. And we
Mhm.
had a partnership with them and they promoted our app. They paid to promote our app, something like 30,000 euros to do it. And they were really driving the campaign. And despite that, like it went nowhere and there was too much politics and a lot of people doing nothing and taking advantage of me and not paying me and not trying to give me a cut even though I was a workforce. But I digress. And then caused me to have severe burnout. I blame them. I mean, I blame myself too. I shouldn't have worked that hard. I should have known better. But I was just so determined to succeed at something. Um,
Yeah.
and I didn't, despite working so hard. And that felt really, really bad. It felt fucking terrible, actually. I can still feel it, like in my heart, how bad I felt. But had that not happened, I wouldn't have pursued coding and found something that just means so much to me and really plays a huge part of like, uh, what am I trying to say? Like how I perceive my value in this world. That's very like existential, but we're all
Mhm.
searching for like, what's my purpose? What's my meaning? I need to feel like I'm providing value or I'm serving a purpose. And I would say coding and just like helping people and like the aspect of like I do with coding or coding for immigrants, like that's really my purpose. Well, besides raising my little shithead, of course. So but
Okay,
it
yeah.
feels really good. And I'm really glad that that happened. I'm angry, but I'm glad.
I think sometimes
So,
failure are so on, like this culture of never fail. It's, I mean, ridiculous. I wanted to talk about like your team and H&M. How you say that in Swedish? Ha och M, something like that.
Hoem.
Okay, your
Hoem.
team H&M, and also like
Use a
the team
hoe.
in what's that? SFE. I mean, I think the chapter has kept like you have kept the chapter and the community like I would say united for more than a year, which for a Codecademy is very impressive. And also like your team and HOM, how do you help transforming that team into a more transparent and collaborative one?
That's a really good question. And that's something that the team I was placed on struggled with quite a bit because half of our team is based throughout India. And I say throughout India because none of them are in the same place. India is such a huge country and a huge just cultural mecca. People, I think there's something like what, over 10,000 religions or something just in the country of India. There's so many different
Yeah,
cultural
crazy.
backgrounds there. Yeah, and
Mm,
to think that, oh, all Indian people are the same. No, they're not. They're coming from completely different parts of their country, which is huge. And it, they're not working in the same place together and not, we're all the way over here. And when you think of Indian culture, it's very much like Latino culture. It's very family oriented. It can be deeply religious, but it's also very social and like they like to party, they like to have fun, they like to eat good food, they like to drink, they like to dance. And then Swedes are like on the opposite spectrum of that. Swedes are just very like, this is my impersonation of a Swedish person. They're like, oh God. And if you talk to them, like I said hi to one of my neighbors today because he's new and he was just like, hi. Like he was like so
we
taken
are the
aback by me.
American.
Just like, who is this weird fucking person talking to me? And I'm not saying that the Swedish people on my team are like that, but I will say that they're not the most conscious, most culturally conscious people. And coming onto this team, they were like, oh, the Indian people, they just don't speak up enough, and we need to hear more from them. And so like the first month or two, I was just trying to like kind of get the vibe, understand what's going on, try to understand what the hell's going on in general with this company and their tech stack. But I digress. Um, but then when I took over as Scrum Master for the team, you know, the question that I especially kept posing to my Swedish counterparts is, are we creating an environment where they feel comfortable enough to speak? Are we asking them? Are we going out of our way to ask them, what do you think? How do you feel? What is your opinion on this? How can we change this? Why do you think that this, like we had this huge, just like error, like 42 of our batch jobs, like programs that run every day that enable our logistics process, 42 of them failed today. Probably edit this out. Maybe I'm sharing trade secrets. I don't know. Um, and it's not our job to monitor them, but someone from my team, Nithya, she's my mentor. She's amazing. She's brilliant. She solved it. She solved it in like 2 hours. And now she's comfortable enough to say, to like be able to speak up and say, this is why this happened, and this is how we make sure it doesn't happen again, you know? Um, whereas before, I don't think she would feel comfortable enough to say to everyone, this is how we're going to make sure it doesn't happen. We can't keep doing this. You know, we can't keep working in this way. But just creating an environment to where that they feel comfortable enough to speak, or us being a bit more personable, because in Sweden it was very much like, I don't go to work to get to know my colleagues. I don't go to work to be friends with people. And I'm like, okay, but that's how Indian people seem to work, or our, you know, our colleagues throughout India. They want to have a more personal relationship. They want to talk about their kids. They want to talk about food. They want to talk about culture, theirs and ours, and get to know us on a more personal level. Why can't we do that? Like, what's the issue? We can just spend 5 to 10 minutes talking to them. They are on our team. You know, we work together every day. What if we just spent 5 minutes every day doing that and then getting to work, not just keeping our heads down, getting to work and ending the meeting without just talking to each other like we're humans, you know, instead of like working in a factory and creating output. So that was a long answer as well.
It was a great one. I also read this book about, I think it's called Creativity Inc. That from the guy from Pixar, Ed Catmull. He's actually a physicist, and he wanted to like create this culture in Pixar where everyone is candor and you can say what you don't like and all this stuff. And I think it's pretty uh, a really good portion of their success in Pixar, their work culture. And you can just
Absolutely.
replicate that. You can just sell that to another company or just buy that in your team. So yeah, I think it's a pretty underrated feature in any company or any team. Like how can we like uh, make make it more transparent, where people can like also like take ownership of what they're doing, so they would feel more free to talk what they want to talk about. Talking about companies, what advice would you give to someone like who is at university, like Juan, or just want to start coding? What would you advise them if you like they know nothing about like or they have some idea, but they say, okay, maybe a good advice they could get?
Hmm. I I need to think, because it depends on what he or she is studying in university. But I would say, I guess it's really different from like us in our coding group, because most of us have already gone to university. We're just transitioning careers. But from going from university to trying to find a career in tech, I think is a completely different experience. So I don't know if I can give the best advice with that, but what I will say is network. I think networking is probably the most important thing you can do, especially in tech, because people are kind of perceived as being closed off, I think, and that perception is completely wrong. But some people are introverted, and that's fine. But I think just putting yourself out there and like getting to know people and asking them, I think showing interest in other people, I think is a really good thing. And trying to find a mentor as well could be a good thing as well. Just randomly go outside your comfort zone. I add random people on LinkedIn all the time and just send them messages. And I'm like, hey, what's up? I'm glad we're friends. If you want to meet up sometime, I'm totally down. Like, that is definitely my personality type, but it really does pay off, I think. And I think knowing that learning isn't going to stop when you graduate. If you're going into a career in tech, you're going to be learning every single day. So I think priming yourself and knowing, oh, yeah, it's not over yet. University isn't actually over, or the learning part isn't over is good. But yeah, networking, working on your soft skills and meeting people, putting yourself out there and continuing to learn or prime yourself to learn, I think are very important things. I mean, getting practical experience, of course, but I think that that's kind of obvious. So I didn't really feel the need to say that. But yeah, that's my advice. But Nelson, I see you have a question as well. Soft skills are everything in tech. You maybe spend like 20% of the time, 15% of the time actually doing the tech, and the rest of the time you're using your soft skills, such as collaborating, uh, gathering requirements from your stakeholders. Well, I guess it really just depends on like if your PO is doing that. Hello, Juan. But you're spending so much of your time just collaborating with other people that I think soft skills plays probably the biggest role in working in tech. Being able to communicate well. I'm reading this book right now. It's so good. It's called User Story Mapping. Um, it's an O'Reilly book, but it talks about like you can come up with a plan and you can even put it on paper and it's gonna make sense to you, but it's not gonna make sense to everyone else, no matter how clear you are. So you kind of whenever you're coming up with an idea or a plan or really trying to add context to it, I think it's really good to discuss it with other people as well. And that's where your soft skills come in again, is being able to communicate, being able to collaborate, and being able to create a, uh, a baseline of understanding between everyone. That is what working in tech is, essentially. And yeah, I won't say what I was going to say about age. I won't say anything else. I told Enrique, before you hit record, just stop me if I'm about to say something bad. But now I'm stopping myself. But yeah, that's what working in tech is just talking to other people all day and maybe coding like for an hour. So at least in my job, I think it can be different. Like I just imagine people working at Facebook and they're like plugged in all day in a basement, but maybe that's not true.
With Doritos?
With Doritos and Mountain Dew.
One.
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Talking about these advices, let's talk about like bad advices. Like, what are the some bad recommendations you hear in like your daily life or profession, or something that you have heard that you say, "Hey, this was a really shit advice, and it's not true."
Oh, that is a great
I
question.
think Juan, you're on mute, Juan. I can't hear you. I think it's happening.
Yeah, you're still on mute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Juan, how old are you? Because you look like you're 16. It's the braces.
What's the answer? I'm talking in this moment. No, we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
He
You're
looks
gonna
like
have to
he's
unmute your
singing.
mic.
Wait, how can I unmute him?
Wait,
Can I force him to unmute
I don't
himself?
think
He's
so.
18.
Oh my God, so young.
Oh, I think he doesn't. Video off. Okay.
What is bad advice though? Oh, I get so much bad advice all the time. I won't mention why, but I'm sure you can guess why I get it. But oh, that's such a great question. The only thing that I really feel like I have to say is the worst advice I get is kind of like, and I hate this, and I think it kind of speaks for like older working cultures, or more like professionalism. That I think that professionalism very much is important in the workplace, but I don't think that you should have to conceal who you are or tone down who you are to create this environment of professionalism. I mean, of course, if I was screaming and Enrique follows me on Instagram, so if I'm like sharing these memes or like being like my memes, which I am in my private life. I'm just crazy. I'm nuts. So I'm not saying I can't be nuts. I should be nuts at work. I shouldn't. But I get advice like, if you're being too emotional, you should tone down your emotions. And I think that that can be stemmed within sexism as well, or a very much a sexist thing. You're all men here, so if I'm making you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine. Um, but I think, but it can go both ways with some of my colleagues as well. Is like, you're being too emotional. You really need to tone it down. But I'm like, why can't I be emotional? Why can't I be vulnerable? Like, why can't I say right now that I'm scared or that I'm uncertain about what's going to happen? That's the truth. And like, the best way to move past that is to just be honest about it. And then I should be able to trust my team and us working through that together. Like, work is such a big part of our lives. So why can't we be sensitive at work, or why can't we just say how we're feeling? Like, and I do it anyways, even though people tell me not to do it. And I haven't been fired yet. I'm getting my contract on Monday, so I don't know. I think being yourself and being vulnerable, like, I think it's relatable because I think we're living through so many uncertainties right now with the climate crisis and Corona and now the goddamn war and like inflation going through the roof. Like, who isn't scared right now? Why shouldn't I be able to say I'm scared or I'm nervous? Like, we
Mm.
all are, And if we're all in this together, why can't we just be there for each other? So I don't know. I hate that advice. It's probably good advice. I probably shouldn't be so
Crypto
emotional
bubble.
at work, but I am. Sorry, what?
Nelson just said cryptocurrencies bubble. This is Phoenix crypto, so you are not allowed to say that.
I didn't say anything about crypto. I just said
It was
inflation's through the roof.
Nelson. Okay, I
Oh,
have a
No,
weird
because
crypto
question.
you
bubble.
were mentioning the climate change, the coronavirus, the cryptocurrency bubble. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Crypto bubble.
No, but it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
this Bitcoin and Luna and all this thing is crazy. I mean, it's crazy times. Stay hard, stay strong. Yeah.
Um, Side note, but if you don't listen to Darknet Diaries, it's a podcast, listen to Darknet Diaries. And there's this
Yeah.
episode about this guy that would steal crypto from other people. Oh, it's so good. Oh, I got to see the episode. I was so into it because he was like 14 and stealing like thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin in 2012. And now he's just like, yeah, and I already like, I sold it at that time. He's like, so imagine if I had it now, I'd be like a multi-millionaire. But
The Lambo thing in
yes, it's called
crypto.
Hot
Yeah.
Swap.
Wait, before
Yeah.
I stop recording, I have one more question for you. Where is the best place to get in Texas to get a barbecue?
I am a Franklin's fan. I love Franklin so much. It's in Austin. You'll have to wait in line for like an hour, maybe 2 hours to get barbecue. Best barbecue I've ever had. And you can drink in line too. So people would take their champagne and have little mimosas, champagne and orange juice at 9 a.m. in the morning. I love Franklin's barbecue. absolutely my favorite. And their master, Aaron Franklin, is really nice. So, and actually, my friend here, Flynn, who was a part of the upskill company with me, he worked there when he was back in the U.S. He was working in the pits too,
Wow,
starting the smokers up at 3 a.m. So yeah,
I love
but I can
traces.
send you a video for you. I know you do. That's why you're my
Yeah.
friend. I feel like that's the only reason why you're my friend.
Okay,
And I'm not
I
even a
love that
proper
you
like
love that.
Texan.
Isn't like the best place ever to like to be? I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna stop
Texas?
recording before I say something